Hannah stood frozen, heart racing, as the judge dismissed the case with a sneer. The courtroom fell silent, her fight crushed. But what happened next would shake everyone to their core. A single decision, one moment, it would make even the judge question his actions. But let's start from the beginning. The courtroom hummed with low whispers as Hannah Miller, no more than 16, took her place at the defendant's table. The weight of the room pressed down on her. The seasoned lawyers, the intimidating judges, the cold, indifferent gaze of the gallery. A teenager, barely out of high school, among professionals who had decades of experience. It seemed absurd. Everyone knew she didn't belong here. Yet, Hannah stood her ground, determined. Her client, Michael Thompson, was innocent. She believed that with everything she had. He was being framed, wrongly accused. She had spent countless sleepless nights poring over evidence, searching for a crack in the prosecution's case. Her hands trembled, but her resolve was unwavering. But as the trial wore on, the insults began. Judge Allen, with his sharp, mocking tone, barely bothered to hide his contempt. Every word he spoke to her dripped with condescension. "You don't understand this, Ms. Miller," he'd say. "This is above your head." Each jab felt like a blow, each dismissal a wound, and still she fought. She presented her arguments with the precision of someone who knew the case better than her age suggested. Yet, no matter how hard she tried, the judge seemed determined to make sure she failed. The moment arrived. Judge Allen stood, casting a cold glance at the defense table. "This case is dismissed," he declared, his voice sharp and final. "You clearly have no understanding of the law, Ms. Miller." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Hannah's stomach dropped, her vision blurred. It felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She had given everything, every ounce of energy, every shred of belief, to this case. But in the end, it wasn't enough. The courtroom was dead silent. Her client's fate hung in the air, condemned by a system that refused to see her as equal. Anger surged through her, hot and unrelenting. Yet, in that moment, there was nothing she could do but face the bitter sting of defeat. Hannah sat outside the courtroom, her hands trembling with barely contained fury. The cold stone wall behind her felt like a physical barrier, one she couldn't break through. Michael's future, his life, was now in the hands of a broken system that cared nothing for truth, only the illusion of justice. Her chest ached with the weight of that realization. The courtroom, with its polished suits and smug smiles, had never been a place where truth mattered. They didn't know what it was like to fight with only belief as a weapon, to stand up against a force so much bigger than you, knowing every step could be your last. She clenched her fists, the anger building with every passing second. The faces of the other lawyers flashed in her mind. Those seasoned professionals who never hesitated, who never questioned their place. They hadn't been in the trenches, hadn't sacrificed themselves to a cause like she had. And yet, they were always seen as the ones who deserved to be there. "Hey, you did everything you could." Michael's voice broke through her thoughts, soft and steady. She turned to him, seeing the worry in his eyes, but it only made her feel more isolated. She shook her head, wiping away the frustration that was threatening to drown her. "No, Michael," she said, her voice low but fierce. "I haven't done enough. This isn't over." She wasn't about to let this injustice stand. The system might have silenced her in that courtroom, but there had to be another way. She could still fight. She could still prove them wrong. Her thoughts whirled with determination, each new idea sparking a tiny flame of hope. But the anger toward Judge Allen, the man who had dismissed her so easily, was like a fire in her chest. Every time she thought of his smug, condescending face, that rage flared hotter. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The more she thought about it, the more she knew she was going to make him regret underestimating her. There had to be a way to turn this around, and she was going to find it. There was no backing down now. The day after the trial's humiliating conclusion, the media erupted in a frenzy. Headlines screamed about the shocking dismissal, mocking Hannah's youth, while others debated whether justice had truly been served. But none of that mattered to Hannah. The moment she stepped out of that courtroom, her resolve only grew stronger. She wouldn't back down. If anything, this only fueled her desire to fight harder. She was going to do whatever it took to prove Michael's innocence. With a fierce determination, Hannah hit the streets. She spoke to witnesses, people who had been too afraid to come forward before, terrified of what the system might do to them. Some hesitated at first, but Hannah's relentless drive soon won them over. She dug deeper, searching through every scrap of information, piecing together the fragments of the case that had been deliberately overlooked. Night after night, she pored over the evidence, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, her mind spinning with new possibilities. She couldn't let go of the thought that Michael was being crushed by a system that had no interest in truth, only in closing cases. Her every waking hour was consumed with one goal: to uncover the truth. The harder she pushed, the more she uncovered. Then, after a week of relentless work, it happened. A breakthrough. One of the eyewitnesses, the man who had been too intimidated to speak up, finally agreed to testify. The weight of his words, the truth he held inside him, was a game changer. But even that wasn't enough to satisfy Hannah. She knew there had to be more. Her team worked tirelessly, tracking down every lead, and they found it. Video footage, taken by a passerby, that directly contradicted the claims made against Michael. The footage revealed the reality of what happened that day, proof that Michael had been innocent all along, and that the accusations against him were nothing more than a fabrication. Now, armed with the truth, it was time to go back to court. The system had underestimated her once, but not again. This time, she wasn't walking in with hope. She was walking in with undeniable proof. The battle was far from over, but Hannah knew this was just the beginning. The second trial began with the same oppressive air, but this time Hannah was ready. The defense had a new argument, a fresh perspective, and undeniable proof. Hannah stood tall, no longer the nervous teen who had been mocked just days ago. She presented her case with confidence, dissecting the evidence piece by piece, exposing the flaws in the prosecution's argument. Judge Allen, who had been so sure of his decision earlier, now sat in stunned silence as the truth unraveled before him. The prosecution tried to deflect, but the weight of the evidence was too much. With no way out, they were forced to drop the charges. Hannah Miller had done it. The truth had won, and Judge Allen was left with nothing but the bitter taste of his own arrogance. As the gavel came down, signaling the verdict of innocence for Michael, Hannah allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. Her faith in justice had been restored, not by the system, but by her relentless pursuit of what was right.